Wildboar Clough here in Longdendale in the High Peak runs from Bleak Plateau behind me down to Torside Reservoir. It is one of the better known Peak District scrambles, graded 2/3, so it is certainly going to be pushing the boundaries for a grade 1 scrambler. The approach to Wildboar Clough runs a short way from Torside car park along the Longdendale Trail, past this interpretation board and bench, and then south along these steps up into woodland. The path is pretty clear and it tracks fairly steeply upwards above the clough, over a dilapidated fence, and then here over a broken down wall. Past where the two lower halves of the clough join, and further still past the top of the woodland, this small cluster of rowan trees marks the first point where you can realistically get down into the clough using the path that runs just down there. From the entry point you can choose to clamber the huge boulders that strew across the clough. The surface is not too bad in terms of grip, though there's a thin patina of algae on a number of them that you have to take care of. Alternatively, there's a thin path running alongside that you might choose to use because the serious business doesn't begin until some way ahead. I've now reached a point where the gradient is winding up a bit, but you still have the options of either clambering over the boulders or following the path, which by now has passed over onto the left side of the clough. Looking at the scramble with my gill scrambler's eyes, there's nothing as yet that would entice me into a wetsuit and into the brook, but water levels are relatively low given it hasn't rained very much recently. Weather impacts scrambles. I normally say this in relation to bright sunshine improving any scramble, but mist works well with Wildboar Clough. It's making things atmospheric, even mysterious. Just around the corner, I'm not sure you can describe this as a pitch, but it's the first section that calls out to me to say this is actually worth a scramble. The sides of the clough are starting to close in. It's becoming more difficult to take the side path, and from this point I'm going to scramble up the centre part of the clough up towards what you might be able to see in the mist ahead. There is the first of the main waterfalls. You do now need to tread a little carefully. First of all, to keep your feet dry, and secondly because the amount of slippery algae on some of the rocks has increased. This is a pitchlet more than a pitch. If you fancy a challenge, go up to the right. If you're a grade 1 scrambler, go up to the left. This is the first tricky bit. You have to go up on the left, either tuck both legs over the edge of this boulder or straddle it, hump yourself up, grab handholds on this boulder and pull yourself through. It is inelegant, but it gets the job done. Having completed the straddle, you're straight into the next waterfall and the next pitch. Like the previous one, it's also grade 2. Pretty obvious route going up this groove here. Reasonable series of footholds and handholds, but in most conditions they're going to be wet. And bam, straight into the next set of pitches and waterfalls. 40 feet high, but actually not quite as bad as it might look because it's broken into a short initial section here that's easy enough, and then you go round the corner in order to climb up the next one. Here at the small waterfall you've got two options. Go up on the right hand side. Looks like a reasonable set of steps, but the steps are quite large, difficult to get onto at first, and they're also pretty greasy. Alternatively, here on the left side, somewhat drier, left foot here, right foot here, and there's a handhold up here that you can use to grab onto and haul yourself up onto the top. My preference, probably the left. First thought when you see this waterfall is, how the hell am I going to get up that? As luck would have it, the answer is you're not, because you're going to go off up this gully to the left. I wouldn't exactly say you can relax when you see the gully off to the left, but it's a standard grade 2 that doesn't present any particular problems. Above the waterfall, which incidentally looked like it could be climbed at grade 3 with a rope, and if you don't mind getting yourself very wet, we're now back in grade 1 territory. It's more of the same as you carry on up. Series of shallow cascades with very short grade 1 scrambles beside them. I think this may be the last of the cascades. A tad more difficult because it's slightly overhung, but there's a set of steps up there on the left. Probably grade it about a 1+. Jumping back to my gill scrambler's eye, those cascades and also some of the pools could give you justification for putting on a wetsuit and doing this as a gill scramble. You'll also notice, by the way, there's quite a bit of froth in Wildboar Clough. I'm reliably informed that's not because the sheep are doing too much washing up, but it's just natural dissolved organic matter. The gradient has flattened out and there is no scrambling here. The only reason I'm carrying on is because the Ordnance Survey map shows a waterfall ahead. Oh dear, somehow this merits the mark of waterfall on the Ordnance Survey map, whereas all of the actual waterfalls down in the clough didn't. However, it was worth coming this far because it marks the natural endpoint of the walk, because the fence has appeared above and the path down runs alongside that fence. I'll cover the route out shortly, but now's a good moment to review Wildboar Clough. It's fairly quick to get to the start point, at least the clambering start point. It takes rather longer to get to the scramble. There's plenty of grade 1 within it, but then there is that central compact set of 4 grade 2 pitches. They're over quite quickly, but they are difficult. They are a bit scary. They require quite a bit of thought. And so I would say, though, overall they stretched, but they didn't burst what I regard as my grade 1 capabilities. So overall, I really liked Wildboar Clough. Definitely going to come back here again, and I'm going to rate it an 8 out of 10. You have 3 exit options when you come to the end of the Wildboar Clough scramble. There's a path that goes across here, across Lawrence Edge towards Shining Clough, and eventually takes you down to the reservoirs. Alternatively, you can keep going up Wildboar Clough, that is heading south until you hit the Pennine Way, and then head west along the Pennine Way down Torside Clough. Or alternatively, there is an unmarked and very rough path that follows this fence line more directly down, and that's the one I'm going to take. The path is rough and soggy and boggy and peaty and often faint and hard to follow, but just keep the fence on your left and you can't go wrong. The fence at first is level, meaning that the clough itself falls away ever lower beneath you on your right hand side, but then eventually the fence and obviously the path as well fall steeply down the shoulder of the hillside above the clough. At one point there's an angle in the fence that takes it somewhat away from the clough, and you'll come to this stile and corner. Don't go over the stile, but follow the rusty fence along towards the clough, and you might just be able to see in the distance there are the rowan trees that mark the entry point from the clough, and from there obviously just retrace your steps down through the woods to the Longdendale Trail. Last of all, here's the route map. Blue for the walk-in from Torside Reservoir car park, red for the scramble, and blue again for the return leg down the hillside. If you'd like further details, then take a look at the text description underneath the video.